What's happening to the people of Maine right now feels like a storm. It feels like an unstoppable force of nature that threatens to ravage these communities. But the most maddening thing about the danger to these communities is that it's man-made, artificial, and completely premeditated. It didn't have to be this way. On a wet, stormy Wednesday in October, fishermen up and down the coast of Maine stopped work early and set out on a trek for the city of Portland. This 3-hour meeting would be their one and only chance to speak in person to the regulators on the brink of outlawing their fundamental way of life, a fishery that has been sustainable for centuries. Despite an immaculate track record of protecting all of their natural resources, and reluctant but undeniable compliance with what was a 98% so-called risk reduction by 2030, a federal judge struck a blow to their efforts at defense from these arbitrary measures and ramped up the timeline to a 90% reduction due to be codified in just 1 year, which NOAA Fisheries is charged with enforcing. And now it all comes down to one short window of time on a rainy evening in a city for an entire culture to plead for their existence. I moved from Maine to Massachusetts over a decade ago because there weren't any video production job openings in down East Maine. But ironically, living 100 miles west of Boston, the drive for me to this Portland meeting is shorter than the drive for many of the people whose fate is being decided. There should be more of these meetings, and they should be held near the communities directly affected. But they almost didn't get a physical meeting at all. Just 1 week before, the only opportunity scheduled to be offered to the people on the chopping block was a single, slapdash virtual online webinar. As I drove through the rain toward the state line, I reflected on the words so many Mainers spoke in that meeting, words which should be given heed by our public servants. I don't have footage on hand of the vast majority of the people who spoke that night, which puts me in a tricky spot as to how to make a video out of this. And so you're going to be seeing a lot of my nephew, Elias, in this video. Elias already wants to be a lobsterman just like his daddy. And if he gets the chance to have that future, Elias would be the 10th generation in his maternal line to fish out of Swans Island, Maine. Elias and his parents are just one example of thousands of families threatened with extinction by the impending 90% risk reduction. So you'll be seeing a lot of footage of them as you hear people calling in to make their comments to the federal regulators back on September 28th.
Why are you not considering ship strikes as part of the reduction? Where is the scientific proof that Maine lobster industry is causing the death of these whales? Why are you going on supposition and conjecture rather than the facts that there has been zero entanglements in Maine waters?
We are required to do this under the Marine Protection Act. NOAA Fisheries did not, we don't write the Marine Protection Act. Our job is to implement it. We are required to implement it. And when we don't do it, then sometimes the courts step in.
All of those graphs and charts, they don't represent the families, the industries, all of the hard work that all of our lives represent. It's just not reflective of what our industry is. In dear Al Stonington, I know you guys have heard this before, 78% of the revenues that run our town come from fishing. We are a coastal community. What will that look like if you implement these changes? Right now, we are looking at a 10% reduction of the fleet in Stonington alone. People are selling out their entire business because they are scared that if they don't do it right now, they'll have no value left in their fishing operation, their business. And what are they going to do? There's only so many greeters at Walmart. Right now, Maine is being judged. We are already guilty, and we haven't even had the trial.
This action is going to be devastating for many Maine communities. This opportunity is insufficient, poorly timed, and fails to achieve the core purpose of scoping on such an action. Creating further challenges was NOAA's decision to deny access to the decision support tool until yesterday. NOAA should do its best to give an understanding of what these impacts are and hear the people from the state of Maine and up, as well as up and down the East Coast. NOAA has scheduled tonight's scoping meeting at 4:30 during the New England Fisheries Management Council, where an agenda item considering a SCOLLOP action is taking people away from this scoping meeting so they can focus on the council meeting. The current scoping period is also running concurrent with the TRT meetings that began September 19th. The time frame is exceptionally short, given the TRT is already in the process of exploring the potentials to propose measures and packages of measures, proposals, and ultimately to be voted on in November. How can this concurrent scoping period inform that discussion? This feels like a box-checking exercise and not a real attempt to solicit input on plan modifications. It is just not right to ask Maine's lobster fishery to bear the burden of reducing risk to right whales when the fisheries does not have a documented right whale serious injury or mortality. No one needs to ensure that the measures being developed are practical, feasible, and defensible. So far, this one is not.
Thank you, Commissioner. Gib Brogan.
Thank you. My name is Gib Brogan. I represent Oceana. We're hoping the Fisheries Service is going to include gear-restricted areas with incentives to use pop-up or on-demand gear. We need to couple that with gear and vertical line reduction. There's still more to be done. We can catch similar amounts with less gear. So we're asking that we have better monitoring of the boats. Specifically, AIS technology should be on every boat so we know where and when fishing is happening and where and when fishing isn't happening. And the managers and the TRT come together to craft what will likely be the next round of regulations. This action should have a hard set of incentives to transition to on-demand or ropeless gear. That is the future for these fisheries, and the Fisheries Service should help ropeless and on-demand gear move along.
The fellow from Oceana mentioned tracking the boats. Well, you can track boats all day long, but it doesn't mean a darn thing if there's not any whales around. So at the time when we can send spaceships to Mars, I gotta believe somehow we can figure out a way to track whales. You track the whales, then maybe it makes sense to track boats. NIM's decision not to release the decision-making tool took away any chance for us to have a meaningful conversation. You just released it yesterday afternoon, according to what I've heard. I mean, why would you withhold a document that belongs to the people, for one, and has a huge bearing on what we're trying to achieve? The goalpost, you can't see the goalpost, you can't score. We have to have the conversations. Different things work in different areas. If you don't know that, you should. You should have already known it because it's been brought up many times before.
My name is Kristen Porter. I'm president of the Maine Lobstermen's Association and also a TRT member. From being on the TRT, and I want everybody to hear this, that this past week we've been working on just some possible measures. This is really, really hard. These are measures that are going to really hurt, and there were measures put forth that looked really bad that didn't come close to 90%. So I want people to realize that this is real, and this is coming, and it's not going to be pretty. Commissioner Kelleher stole my thunder. He mentioned the New England Fisheries Management Council talking on a SCOLLOP action. Well, that SCOLLOP action involved about a little over 300 boats. They had 9 scoping meetings, 7 in person and 2 online. This night, 10 different fisheries from Florida to Maine. A small portion are going to get their say. These people deserve better. They really do. This is unacceptable what's going on here tonight. And like Commissioner Kelleher said, this needs to be extended. The time is too short. So thank you very much.
Yes, my name is John Gruen. What I ask is that you allow more time for this process to go through. During phase 1 of risk reduction, the state of Maine through the DMR and the Lobster Advisory Council and the 7 zone councils of Maine worked to develop a risk reduction plan that met the at then 60%. That plan was accepted, approved, and then the equation was changed. To me, that's very childlike. This is my game and I make up the rules as I go. But anyways, now we're into this phase, which we, again, we're denied access to the decision support tool. Again, very childish. This is my ball and you can't play with it. To deny us access to try to figure out how a scenario may work to fit into your plan is unfair to the industry. So I ask, just as Commissioner Kelleher did at the beginning and everything, to extend the time frame somehow, allow the state to work on a plan. We did it the first time, and if it's warranted and it's possible, we will do it the second time. But we need time. I guess that's all that I have. Thank you very much.
You're going to consolidate and decimate some of the last primary economy hunter-gatherer cultures left in the Northeast.
Our fishery risk reduction for our fishery will only slowly strangle the last stretch of working coastline on the East Coast. I will not waste time figuring out how to tie the noose around my neck.
I would like to know how you're going to compensate these people that have depended on this for hundreds of years. As in Alaska with the Eskimos, they have provided them the opportunity to continue what they were doing. I don't understand why the lobstermen aren't. How many lobstermen noticed that all of the ropes on the whales that we're shown on TV are way bigger than lobster rope? They are not from lobster traps. I have yet to see one. Even the one you just showed on the slide today is not a lobster pot rope.
Yes.
A 90% reduction would just cripple my town and many towns like mine. But if I understood your math right in the beginning, we're credited for killing between 3 and 4 whales a year. Over the past 20 years, that'd be 60 to 80 whales floating around with our traps on it. There's just no way we wouldn't be seeing them everywhere. Even if it was 0.5%, and that's 10 whales in the last 20 years, you wouldn't have crab pictures up on the wall.
Your animated, or whoever made the animated whale, is a laughing joke. And for them to show it to the judge, he doesn't know anything about lobstering. And for them to show that animation and have it on TV, whales do not act like that and don't go around in circle and circle and circle around a rope. And it's pathetic. It is pathetic what you're doing to these fishermen. It's lie after lie after lie.
My name is Dustin Delano. I'm a 4th generation lobsterman. We need to focus on tracking the northern right whales like they do the southern right whales. This whole push for ropeless gear, it's just not feasible. It's not going to work. I don't know how many guys that are listening in on this want to set a trawl off and risk their help getting caught in the trawl and going overboard, and no way to retrieve that person when that gear hits the bottom. Whoever's in that trawl and goes overboard, they're dead. And we're going to stand there and we're going to watch it happen. We're going to haul them back when they're already drowned. And that's what's being pushed on us. One thing's for certain, there's about 50 people in this room where I am here in Brunswick. When I look around the room, there's going to be about 10 of us left if this happens. We don't deserve that. Our families don't deserve that. Our kids don't deserve that. The state doesn't deserve that.
Like many other lobster fishermen, my husband and I have a 10-year-old that has put many hours in as a fisherman's daughter by way of boat and gear maintenance. From the time she could hold a paintbrush, she's been exposed to the hard work and effort that goes into making the living that puts a roof over our head, food in the fridge, and shoes on our feet. Lobster fishing is more than a profession, it's our way of life. And many of our fishing communities are located in areas where wages are quite low for necessary positions like education, social work. I am in social work myself with a bachelor's degree. Nursing, hospitality, customer service, and our emergency services. Positions that certainly don't pay enough to support a family on. Lobster fishing helps to support these positions and provide the services our communities need to be healthy. The closing of our industry, or this 90% reduction, will collapse our coastal communities, dissipating out of a need to survive.
I fish with my father, and if you shut down areas, you're going to have all those fishermen in those areas go down. bring all their gear into the other areas that are still open. So then you have even more problems in that area.
If you were really worried about whales, you would never consider having closed areas. Closed areas don't work. They create a curtain of gear every time, with no exceptions. If you tell me I can't fish here, I'm gonna be right on the line, every time. That's how it is. It's the nature of the beast. We're gonna move it just as little as we have to, but also the resource is gonna stack right up against that line. None of it makes sense to me. My entire family are lobster license holders. Within our own household, we have 1,550 tags. How many tags do you think got used last year? Less than 750. If you're using what Maine sells for tags as a judgment for effort, it's not accurate.
I think it's kind of laughable that this is the one time to offer comments verbally. Most guys aren't going to submit written comments. It's an old fleet. A lot of guys do things in person. So as this being the only opportunity, you're going to hear from a pretty small subset of people who got the email, signed up for the webinar, and signed on. It's going to pretty much kneecap the coast of Maine if we go forward as is. We're operating on the premise that this is actually even sound data or even sound science. It's not really either. The risk and percent risk is all based on what is perceived risk from gear when there's no actual documented entanglements. It probably sounds like we're beating a dead horse right now, but that's where we are. We're doing all these things and making all these modifications, and yet we still don't have documented entanglements. So I guess, yeah, for me, it seems like the sky is falling, Chicken Little, but we're still in the same place.
A long time ago, an old fella told me that was a marine biologist that we were as much, if not more, marine biologists than the person that went to school for it. Most of us are on the water 6 days a week. We see the changing environments, the changing tides, the animals all around us. How come you don't rely on us more than what you actually do for the information that we're trying to tell you? Most of us are telling you that we don't see right whales. I've been fishing since I was 7 years old. I'm 39. So 32 years I've been on the water. I've never seen a right whale in my entire life. I fished most of my life in Upper Blue Hill Bay, where I never saw a whale ever, and I was on the water 6 days a week. Now I fish out of Stonington, offshore. I've yet to see a right whale. It's pretty distinctive. There's not a lot of whales out there that don't have a dorsal fin.
They don't have a fin, they have tubo.
That's right. And I don't understand why you're not relying on us more and believing what we're trying to tell you, that we're not the problem here, that other things are the problem. We have bent over backwards to try and ensure that we don't get entangled in right whales, but it's just not believed, and they're not taking us for our word. I don't understand that.
Vettable data is the problem. Everyone can give you data, but it's not vetted. Well, give us something to be vetted that we as fishermen can be out there. We're out there probably 300 days a year more than any scientist. So there has to be some use in that. But we need a way to have it vetted, to have it on the record as something that's usable in governance.
Hi, I'm Gina Battaglia. I have always been a lobster eater, never anything with fishing or anything, but I've started following Jacob Knowles, and I heard about the situation through him, and I started doing some research, and I kind of back all of the fishermen. I can't find any kind of information that you guys are putting out there that shows that they are causing any risk at all to the right whales, and it just seems like everything that you guys are trying to impose upon them will do nothing but decimate all of their businesses and put all of them out of business. So I really do back what a lot of the other people were saying, where I think you really should do a lot more research on seeing, where these whales are now, because they're not seeing them where they're fishing. See what's actually killing them, because it's not them. At what point do we say, okay, this population is good now, let's get off these fishermen's backs that aren't doing anything and let's leave them alone? Because at this point, it really just seems like it's a political standpoint. It really does. So I just really think that you guys should listen a lot more to the guys that are actually out there doing this every single day, and really take that into consideration, because it doesn't seem fair what you're trying to impose.
We've complied with everything. Every year, even though there's no new entanglements or deaths due to us, you keep piling it on us. In this new timeline, you're going to cripple the whole coast. Forget about the people who have been in it years. What about the ones who have just got in it? I know people personally that have just bought boats this year, trying to get into this to provide for their family, and you're going to rip that right away from them. It's heartbreaking. I'm looking at a thing right now you guys have from 2020. You had, quote unquote, a calving boom. And it's not also a coincidence that this year, 2020, was the year that the cruise ships were down. And incidences were at an all-time low. And it weren't because we were taking a break. We were going balls to the wall. There was 4 incidences in Canada. 3 deaths. The 4th one made it. And there was 2 others outside on the coast. And those were due to collisions. One was in Florida, and one was in South Carolina. Once again, Maine is not on this list. If you cared about these whales as much as you say you do, you would track these things, find out where they are, line them up with other traffic routes, with cruise ships, Canadian gear. You'd find out what is killing these things, but you don't care. This is about getting us out. This ain't about getting lines out. This is about getting fishermen out. That's all I've got to say about that.
It is apparent that we have not entangled or harmed any whales. And we're looking for a magic number. The whale population has more than tripled since they've been put on the Endangered Species Act. What number are you looking for in which we're not under attack anymore? We want to continue our industry. We want to continue to work. We want to continue to teach our kids. I don't think you're sitting there stone-faced. I think you are listening to us. How about you give us a little bit of guidance? You're really looking for something from us, but we've done everything that you've asked of us over and over again for 20 years, generation after generation. We have done everything that's been asked of us. We just want to get up and go to work. I don't know what more you could ask of us. If there was a right whale in trouble, we would be the first to help it. You have got to help us help you. Like, I understand that you need to come up with a solution, but the solution is what we've been doing. What you don't understand is that we are a part of the ecosystem now. We have been feeding, we have been farming these lobsters for over 100 years. What do you think is going to happen to the bottom of the ocean when we stop doing what we're doing? Like, your actions are going to cause more problems than solve anything, because they're not going to solve anything, because there isn't a problem caused by the Maine lobster fishermen. The problem now is being caused by people trying to put us out of business. We can't do any more than what we've already done, which is more than what we should be doing.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jacob Knowles. I'm a 5th generation fisherman from Winter Harbor. I have 2 young sons that I would very much enjoy to teach how to fish the way that I was taught by my father and grandfather, like many families in the coast of Maine. When I hear 90% risk reduction, it leads me to believe that this is a last resort effort. Yet I don't see the motive for the last resort measures. Common sense would tell me that we must have a major problem with multiple entangled deaths, sight unseen, with good documentation supporting it in recent years. How have we not found a whale actively wrapped up in our gear for 18 years? I understand it's easy for you guys to say that you can't trace it back to us, but you've got to also acknowledge the fact that we would have had, they can't all get away from the entanglements. At some point, we would have found one in our gear in the last 18 years. I see no way to comply with 90% that could work for the whole coast. A 90% reduction will undoubtedly put the vast majority of fishermen out of business. As for what measures should be considered to salvage some kind of fishery, again, I don't have any good answers. Regardless of our opinion on viable options, if National Marine Fisheries Service isn't willing to work with us and provide us with time to use the risk assessment tool to run scenarios to see if we can possibly come up with anything that works, then we're all just wasting our breath and waiting for slaughter. So you guys are sitting here claiming that you want us to provide input and you guys want to work with us, but why did you remove our access to the risk management tool? That's pretty contradicting. Even with input from fishermen, time and cooperation from National Marine Fisheries, I am still terrified of the outcome, but maybe we can salvage something. I'd like to finish with a question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but according to your charts, until 2017, the population of the whales was on an upward trend. Those charts show around 2017, something changed, causing an increase in mortality. What changed in our fishery that caused this increase in mortality? Nothing changed. In fact, the opposite. In the past 10 years, our fishery has been hit with regulation after regulation to reduce this risk and become more whale friendly.
The economy is going to be devastated here. We do not have other fisheries. We've been limited out of other fisheries. You can't pivot like you would 30, 40, 50 years ago into scalloping, shrimping, all these things. Everything is limited entry now. If these things are implemented, as I've seen, we're going to be turned into seasonal communities. We're not going to be year-round communities, and I think it's a shame. And honestly, being a taxpayer, I'm ashamed of my government for pushing this on me. I do have a suggestion. If we could add the 600-pound weak link at the surface back into this model, that was taken away, and I don't know why, other than possibly it was effective and it didn't serve the narrative. But that 600-pound weak link at the surface buoys are very important, and they should account for a lot in case of an entanglement. We've reduced the amount of, previously we reduced the amount of knots that we did. Then somehow that got tossed into the mix. Hey, throw some knots in there. That's absolutely asinine. I'm wondering about tracking the whales more instead of going after the gear so much. Using eDNA, I know it's new technology, but if an array of eDNA can be collected up and down the coast, then you could have a summary of where the whale, if there is any body to the whales, where they're moving, and then you could anticipate where they're going maybe. As I look at these trap limits and everything that they're talking about, I mean, we could take a small reduction in our traps and survive, but you can't keep adding all these breakaways in there. We can't get the traps back. The more breakaways you put in, it's very economically unfeasible for us to keep doing this, and it's stressing out the industry as a whole. And that's all I have to say.
So my name is Richard Maximus Strahan, and I am the voice of the whale. And everything happening today is because I got it going. And yes, the fishermen are all going to lose their industry because instead of taking control of the problem and coming up with a solution, they whine that NIMS is supposed to do it. Well, I would suggest they do it. The point is that the fishermen are going down with the right whale like Ahab. They're not, where's Captain Courageous? The idyllic, iconic fisherman's gone, right? All we get are whiners, not recognizing they don't have any problem wiping you out because of that you're failing the Endangered Species Act. And so we at Commerce Corporation actually invented fishing line that won't entangle whales and will not entangle sea turtles and is not electronic. Your way of life can be preserved if you reach out to me and listen to what I've got to say and what my corporation is going to do for you. And you can do that by contacting me any way you want. And I
don't know if he got cut off, but I think he may have been done.
I'd just like to go on the record and strongly encourage NOAA to have a face-to-face meeting with the fishermen in the state of Maine so that we can encourage you guys to give us more time. And I don't just mean in the rulemaking process. I mean looking at the data and not going off predictions.
We are not clearly killing the whales. We have a history of conservation that precedes any individuals that claim to have started all of this. These packages that have been presented will absolutely crush this industry and the coast of Maine as we know it.
As one of the other comments has said that we don't care. Well, that's totally untrue. We do care. We care with our whole heart and soul that our families and our children's children, and who knows, maybe your child would like to be a lobsterman someday. I mean, this is something that we don't discriminate against. Just like a farmer. If you're tough enough to do it and you think you have the will to do it, then go for it. I mean, we admire that. That's what we all look for. And we're not out to hurt things. We're out to preserve it. And I think what you guys have on the table between the 90% reduction, you're going to take away a whole state's income. I mean, it was paper before. Now it's the lobster industry. You took the paper industry away. Now you're coming for the lobster industry to make room for windmill industry. We're not out to harm or kill any creatures. We would just like to be sustainable like we've always been and continue our way of life for several more generations and decades, like we have for the past 100 and something years, to protect the wildlife from the windmill activists and everything. We don't want to see that. That's going to devastate our economy also.
The Maine fishermen are the hugest threat to the windmills. Get rid of us, you make way more available ocean for windmills, because Maine is an untapped potential for that. Huge money.
And I hate to say it too, just like everyone else, this is pretty much a big joke. I mean, the science is there. And you guys could at least ask us before you basically just shut us down completely. But I do appreciate the chance to speak. And, ladies, thank you for your time. But to be real, we're on the water more than anyone. If you guys would just ask us. And I've been fishing for 25 years and I've never seen one whale. And I've been from the Canadian line almost right to Deer Isle. Yes, there's sea life, and in these last probably year and a half, everything's booming. It's crazy. Tuna fish are everywhere. Everything is prospering, but you guys don't see it. Hopefully you guys just use your mind and use your heart. God bless.
All of the other really intelligent fishermen and women makes me really proud to be part of this industry. Just some really smart people and some good insights. I served on the Zone B Council for 4 terms, and I helped come up with a risk reduction plan that actually helped take 30,000 miles of rope out of the water. But at this point, enough is enough. The facts are very clear. We do not kill right whales, and the strawman proposals that I've seen will drive us to extinction. Like my good friend Jeremy Alley said, this is ultimately a disservice to the whales. If you want to help the whales, you need to go after what is killing them, and that's the shipping industry. NOAA really should be ashamed of themselves, giving us a 2-hour virtual meeting to plead for our future and our way of life.
When is the northern right whale and the southern right whale going to be put back into the same category? Because the pair of them are the same species. All this crap that NOAA and these other organizations are pushing onto the fishermen is completely ridiculous. I just started out literally last year on my own. I've been a stern man on and off my entire life. And I've been up as far as 15 miles offshore, and I've never seen a right whale, ever. You guys really should take in consideration all the families, the businesses, car dealerships, restaurants, devastated with the closing of the lobster fishery. 90% reduction is ridiculous. I mean, I waited 6.5 years to get my lobster license, and now I got to worry about if I got to try selling my boat, my traps to be able to make it and move on to something else. Everything in the state of Maine virtually is connected to the lobster fishery in some way, shape, or form. So it's all going to be devastated. I guess that's all I got to say.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kathleen Billings, and I'm the town manager for the town of Stonington. I really want to commend the fishermen and their families for standing up to speak tonight. I have to say I have never seen such a groundswell of support. Also, too, from our area businesses, residents in our community, and even school kids wearing red like they did last Friday. It's something that I haven't really ever seen before, despite many years of seeing the regulations facing Stonington and many other coastal communities. It is kind of concerning to see that these regulations kind of come out, and also too that other industries like shipping or offshore wind can either expand or thrive, while our fishing industry pretty much faces a complete shutdown. Also too, climate change, I do believe is having impacts, and we have done studies and engineering things to prepare for that. A couple of months ago, I urged the selectmen to engage a national economic consulting firm, and we paid like $40,000 to help us prepare for this 10-year whale rule plan that was coming out. The person came last week, and one of his comments and observation was the emotional stress that the community was in after meeting with fishermen and dealers and businesses around. It's, a devastation for us. There's no doubt about it, shutting down the fishery overnight. and losing the jobs and schools and everything else. I'd like to implore, we need more time.
I fish out of Jonesport. I'm a first generation fisherman. Myself, I own a 35-foot boat. I have a 42-foot muscle ridge ordered. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to cancel it because I don't see this fishery surviving at 90% reduction. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional for this, but I'm a marine engineer. I went to Maine Maritime for 4 years. In the spring of 2019, I took my first job other than fishing. I went to work to Bouchard Transportation from Boston to New York, moving jet fuel. And the captain of that tug was a guy from Mississippi who NOAA regulated out of the shrimp fishery. One night, sitting at the galley, he asked me, why did I step away from commercial fishing? And I said, I'm afraid of what's going to come to us with whale regulations. And here we are, 3.5 years later, looking at putting this fishery out of business. The trickle-down effect I'm sorry. The trickle-down effect from $1 put into the economy is 7 to 8 times. So you're talking $10 billion annually removed from the state's economy because of these new regulations that is not going to save a single right whale and is going to ruin tens of thousands of lives. I'm sorry I've drawn this out, but thank you for letting me comment.
Just a week after that heart-wrenching night, fishermen are getting their one chance to speak to these regulators in person. As fishing families steadily file into the university lecture hall, you can feel the passion and sense of purpose for why they are here. Each one of them shares the knowledge and conviction that they have done nothing wrong, that they have not posed harms to right whales. And as inconvenient as it is for them to travel hours away to a city at the last minute on a work night and a school night, they know they need to make their voices heard. And this 3-hour meeting will be a chance for some of them to do just that. At 6 p.m., the meeting is called to order. Unfortunately, we all have to sit through an introductory presentation from the feds, made up of all the same material that we all had to sit through 1 week ago. And you can feel the frustration start to build as 10, 20, 30 minutes of precious time are taken up with this retread. Eventually, the presentation winds down, and with news cameras rolling, the crowd now recognizes that the podium and lights are not here for them. No, this setup is for their public servants to make campaign speeches. Frustration is building to anger in the crowd, many of whom are tired from a long day of work, plus a long drive from home, anxious to speak their piece, and sensing their chance usurped. Hands down, the most awkward moment of the night occurs when the governor speaks. This is an especially tough crowd for her, despite the fact that she's here to read words of support for our fishermen. I believe the ice-cold reception she gets is above all a reflection on her persistent, enthusiastic backing of fishermen's biggest corporate adversaries, offshore wind lobbyists, not to mention the many anti-fishing NGOs supporting and donating to her campaign.
We've got Governor Mills will be going first, followed by Senator Collins, Representative Pingree, Representative Golden, and Gerald Hoover will be providing the statement for Senator
right now. This hearing almost didn't happen, okay? It's because I got him here. me be clear. I shouldn't have had to ask. Given our state's abundant coastline, Maine would become a world leader in floating offshore wind. Floating offshore wind. Well, let me tell you something right now. Offshore wind. Offshore wind. Offshore wind to create good-paying jobs. Offshore wind. Well, let me tell you something right now. Creating good-paying green-collar jobs. Offshore wind. Well, let me tell you something right now. Maine's deep water ports will probably be profitable homes for offshore wind infrastructure, I suggest. Well, let me tell you something right now. I've signed historic legislation that will advance offshore wind. But I'm concerned about the risk reduction to Maine's fishermen and fishing families, more than I am about the risk reduction to the right whales. I strongly believe that offshore wind and Maine's fishing industry can coexist. My administration is connecting companies to global offshore wind opportunities, and we're inviting new offshore wind businesses to invest in our state. We welcome you here. Offshore wind, I'm convinced, will play a pivotal role in our future. Well, let me tell you something right now. I too have a vision of Maine as a leader in offshore wind, and I aim to make that vision a reality. I want to thank the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the partners of New England Aquaventus, Diamond Offshore Wind, and RWE Renewables, our New England neighbors.